Scientists talk a lot about the weather phenomenon El Nino. You heard Jim mention it just a moment ago. I asked meteorologist Bernadette Placky to tell us more about it. She's director of the Climate Matters program at Climate Central, a nonprofit environmental organization.
Well, the fact that this wasn't an El Nino year isn't significant on its own. It becomes significant when you tie it to the fact that this was the hottest year on record. Now, you can have an El Nino year that does not set a record, but when you talk about the hottest year on record for the entire globe, usually there's that extra source of heat, and that can come a few different ways when we have an El Nino that does supply extra heat in the atmosphere.
Here's something interesting, and I didn't know this. You track these global temperatures, and when I saw this figure, it's almost like you can't believe it. 13 of the 15 hottest years have all been since 2000. It's pretty remarkable.
It really is remarkable. When we look at climate and climate change, it's those long-term trends. And so, yes, it is significant that this was the hottest year on record, but there have been records before we started putting all of these emissions into the atmosphere. The thing is, we're seeing them build up. They're becoming more frequent. And when you compile all of those together, that really does tell a story.
And mark the trajectory for me. I mean, where do you see it going?
Well, the overall trend is still upward. It's going to have peaks and valleys because we're still going to have weather. Climate change, again, is a long-term trend in space and time. But the thing is, when you look at weather, you're still going to have rounds of cold, you're still going to have snow, you'll still have years that aren't as hot as other years. But when you look at that big picture, overall it is trending up.
You mentioned snow, and I know that your father teases you often. He says, I'm out there shoveling all your global warming right now whenever there's a big snowfall. Obviously, he's teasing you, razzing you, but there still are skeptics out there. How daunting is that to try and convince them that this is a huge issue?
Well, the thing is, at least from our standpoint at Climate Central, we try to stick to the science because the science speaks volumes. We see it at so many levels that not only are the temperatures going up, but how that's translating into different types of weather. Heavy precipitation events are on the rise. We are also seeing in our oceans the heat content building up and ocean acidification happening. And the list goes on and on. The sea levels are rising. So the evidence is there when you really focus on the science.
Now, Bernadette, for those who don't know, you are a meteorologist in local news, which means you do the 5-day forecast. Now you're looking at global trends. I'll ask you to do more than a 5-day forecast. I mean, what's your forecast as you look outward in terms of this next year?
For this year, it's hard to predict any one year when you're talking about the long-term trends of climate and climate change. But with our emissions still rising, there's really no end in sight with that. We just hit another landmark of the 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the earliest on record, already in January. And that's just a sign that the emissions are still on the rise. So as that continues to happen, we do predict that these temperatures will continue to rise overall.
So let's say magically all the greenhouse gases went away, that this issue wasn't out there. It's not like turning a light switch on and off, though, is it? I mean, this still would take a long time to ratchet down, wouldn't it?
It really would. And that's why the climate scientists and the whole scientific community is so concerned because, again, we're not going to stop this tomorrow. There are so many levels to this whole situation, and the economics come into play, too. But the thing is, carbon dioxide has a long lifespan. So the amount that we're putting in the atmosphere today is going to take, in some cases, hundreds of years to eventually work itself out. And there are other types of greenhouse gases, for example, methane.
You would think that this would be a wake-up call, but I know that you've been at this for a while. Do you think it is, or do we need multiple wake-up calls before people finally get serious about this?
Well, I think we've already had multiple wake-up calls. That's the thing, but we're going to continue to see this evidence pile up.
All right. Bernadette Placky, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You too. Thank you.